here, but to save all of us the trouble, let's just get started. I tell people the basic background that I was once a village mayor. I think most of you know I was elected at a very young age. Dan, I was 19 when I was elected mayor of the village of Tivoli. I just like to say that because I was younger then. But I was elected mayor of the village of Tivoli, and I always tell people that at that level of government, village government is so very personal, so very sort of close knit. And I would go to from the village hall to the post office and back would take me about 2.5 hours, and of course the buildings were right side by side. Because when you go outside, you meet with residents, and folks start asking you questions. And many times residents don't necessarily know what layer of government they're supposed to ask what question of. And it's really not the public's responsibility to understand all of these conflicting layers, but rather those of us as elected officials, it's our job to help you, to figure out what service you might be looking for and what layer of government you may want to complain to. So I took that when I became county executive, and I said, I really want to make county government more accessible for residents. I think a lot of times, we don't necessarily have that kind of direct connection. So my hope when I became county executive was really to change the way we had that we interacted, to create an open dialogue, and to make county government the most responsive it can be. So what does that mean? Since coming into office, we've made a series of adjustments to the county website, making it easier to navigate. We launched Duchess Delivery, which is sort of a constant contact messaging system for residents. We've held telephone town halls. If you ever get a phone call from me, it's likely you're actually getting a phone call from me, or at least telling you to get online to wait for a phone call from me. Telephone town hall, in fact, we just had one on the 2015 tentative budget a few weeks ago. We had some 20,000 residents on the line. Legislator Donna Bollner has just joined us, and I said that she would be here, so we almost have a quorum. So the telephone town halls, and since becoming county executive, I've held somewhere north of 40 town hall sessions around the county. I say that not necessarily to pat myself on the back, but to say to you that it's important. I think it's important that we have an opportunity to talk and that you have an opportunity to ask questions. And just as reference, and they like when I do this, if you were to take the town hall meetings organized by the county executives in all of the counties in the Mid-Hudson Valley, total them, we still have about twice as many. We've held twice as many in Dutchess County as they have combined, because I do think it's that important. Whether it's good news or bad news, I think it's important to have the conversation. So what I want to do is walk you through the 2015 now adopted budget. The county legislature approved this budget last week, and you should have, if you haven't already, you'll get one, but I think you do. You should have one of these documents. This is our budget in brief. So when I came into office, the county budget was fairly difficult to digest, even for people who knew the ins and outs of every line. This budget in brief we crafted 2 years ago, so this is the second budget in brief we've put together. It's sort of a summary of what's in the budget. And what you'll find is the only page you'll find any adjectives is the first page. It's my letter. Everything else inside this document is pretty much fact-driven data related to what's in the budget. It's not about the history of county government. It's just what's in the 2015 budget, and it gives you some basic information. So I really encourage you to take a look at it, use it, and if you have questions tonight, that's a good place to start. Take it home and obviously digest it as you want. On the back of that document is also our contact information, including all of the town halls that we've had this year, with this one being the last one. So our email, phone number, and contact information is there. So let me just walk you through very, very quickly where we started together and then what the 2015 budget looks like. So I came into office in 2012 staring at a $40 million budget gap, the difference between expected expenditures and expected revenues, $40 million budget gap. At the same time, we were in about the 7th year of economic recession. So we were seeing a shrinking tax base, and John and I have talked about this. One of the towns that saw one of the most sizable not reductions, but slowdown in assessed valuation was this one. You remember the late 80s into the mid to late 90s, people were building and building and building, and houses that would only sell for $100,000 30 years ago are selling for $500,000 now. So when I came into office, Dutchess County was in about the 7th year, as was the state and nation, of this economic recession. We had seen about a 23% reduction in the county's assessed valuation. So countywide, the entire pie had shrunk by about 25%, about 23% total. On average, that was $1.3 billion of lost assessed valuation a year. So same demand for services, but the pie we used to pay the bills shrunk 23% over that period of time. So we were facing that when I came into office. At the same time, seismic increase in demand for services, in particular those services that we are mandated to provide. 67% increase in social service caseload. So the economy's bearing down on individuals, and we live in a society where many turn to government for assistance, and in New York State, county governments are the mandated agent to provide social service assistance. So 67% increase in social service assistance, nearly a 60%, 55, 56% increase in mental health caseload, and at the same time, increased costs in mandated expenditures. And I'll get into that a little bit, but let me just tell you that the 2015 budget that was just adopted last week, despite all of our other efforts, and I'll talk about it, includes a $2 million increase in state-mandated costs. So even without anything else, we start with a $2 million gap because of the increased demand and increased costs related to state government. So state mandates. So what did we do? Both out of necessity and desire, we began a multi-year transformation of government. And we don't use that term lightly. And what do I mean by necessity and desire? Well, first out of necessity, facing all of those challenges, we had to find a way to shrink county government. Otherwise, we would have gutted county government, losing the basic services that many residents expect. We thought we could wring out and identify new efficiencies. We thought by reshaping county government, we can consolidate different layers. And of course, at the same time, we were confronting some longstanding challenges, all within the context of trying to restore the county's financial stability. Before we go to the next slide, let me just tell you what that means. I mean, first and foremost, we looked at the entirety of county government and said, well, how do we reorganize? We began in year one with a workforce retirement incentive, 109 positions. Excuse me, in 2 years we eliminated 112 positions. Of those, 3 were physical actual layoffs. And believe me, I don't dismiss that, but 3 human beings out of 112 job eliminations were in fact laid off. The others, though, through workforce a downsize incentive, we were able to shrink county government by 109 plus those 312 positions. Additionally, I came into office, there were 11 separate county departments. That's 11 separate administrators, 11 separate department heads, 11 separate. We now have 9, and we're in the process of getting that down to 8 through consolidation efforts. All because 2 reasons. One, we not only need to save the money, but we think that too many areas of county government function in sort of silos, and we need them to be much more integrated to identify new efficiencies. And we identified big and little things. I mentioned the workforce retirement, but we also took a look at it, our general liability insurance, workers' compensation insurance, health insurance. Some of these things, these contracts hadn't been bid out in a while, so identifying, and sort of putting them out in the marketplace through competition to drive down costs. We saved the 2015 budget reduces. What are you doing to me? The 2015 budget reduces workers' compensation costs and really starts to ring in and drive down some of our general liability costs. But big and little restructuring within county government. And the decisions that we've made over these last 3 years, some of them substantially unpopular, some of them substantially popular, most of them you probably don't even know about, but all come together to produce the 2015 budget adopted a week ago. So the 2015 county budget, no layoffs, but no increase in workforce. We maintain the same number of employees in 15 as we do in 14, making this the smallest workforce in 32 years. There are very few governments in New York State, certainly county governments, who can say that they have the smallest workforce in the last 10 years, let alone the smallest workforce in the last 32 years. That's impressive. What that means is that we have been able to provide service, even with that huge demand, with a smaller workforce, and it's produced $5 to $6 million in annualized savings because of it. And we were able to get there through workforce reduction in incentives, and then again some reduction in workforce through layoffs. Additionally, the 2015 budget cuts county spending. We actually reduce county spending 2015 from 2014's modified budget. That is the third year in a row that that we're cutting spending from the prior year. The budget does include some strategic investment in economic development and infrastructure. Why? Because we can't just cut our way out of economic recession. We have to grow as well. And we're starting to see modest and subtle indications of economic recovery. At the same time, this budget provides the largest property tax levy reduction in 14 years. It's not a huge amount of money, but any dollar given back to the taxpayer for any reason has really been our goal when we can do it. And this budget does, in fact, reduce the property tax levy, the largest amount in 14 years. And because of all of these changes, consolidation, sharing of services, reduction of optional spending, Dutchess County star taxpayers, so if you receive the star tax exemption, will be qualified for a taxpayer rebate check funded by the state of New York. Now, I would rather they not take the money from you to begin with and you just keep it for yourselves, but the way the state law was crafted, if we do certain things at the county level, that requires them to send you a rebate check. When you take the levy reduction in this budget and you add to it the rebate check you will receive in October, it equates to a 2% reduction in tax burden, if you will. I should say 2% offset of tax burden. And that, we think, obviously sets us in the right direction. So, what's next? See, now she's behind me. So we do all of this in this context. This is our 70-30 world. I'm not going to stop talking about it. Dutchess County, like most counties across the state of New York, actually all counties across the state of New York, function in a world where most of what we're required to do, most of the services we're required to provide are mandated by Albany or Washington. In Dutchess County's case, 70% of our budget, 70% of our taxes, 70% of the services we have to provide mandated by Albany or Washington. Now, what does that look like on your dollar? Did you get this one yet? You did, good. This is your dollar, and I think it's a good graphic. And it does sort of give you in sort of full color what this means. This is your dollar, and everyone in county government understands this is your dollar. You do not give it to us willingly. It is charged to you and taken from you through taxation. So every dollar matters, and managing it responsibly matters as well. So when you look at the dollar, you begin to realize that with 70 cents of every dollar, and this is true, 70 cents on every dollar collected in county taxation goes to pay for state and federal mandated costs. That adds up to about $300 million. $300 million of your money we're required to take from you and give it to Albany or Washington, pay for Albany or Washington programs. New York is the only state in America that requires local property taxpayers and local governments, in particular county governments, to shoulder and administer this breadth of service. In fact, as an example, New York State Medicaid spending, so social service spending, Medicaid being what traditionally was referred to as welfare, that nearly 70% increase in service delivery. New York State's Medicaid's program costs twice as much as California, Texas, and Florida combined, and has half as many participants in the program. That tells you the kind of expense that this state makes, kind of fraud, waste, and abuse that exists in the system, and how expansive the state's involvement, impact in everyone's life is, and they require us to pay out of that dollar and that $300 million, $43.5 million for their program. And by the way, they don't bill us and we cut a check, because if we could do that, we would withhold it. They take it out of our bank account. And if we somehow deny them access to our bank account, they stop giving us our sales tax revenue. So there is no hiding from them other than to keep fighting back. So what's the 30 cents go to? If 70 cents goes to all of them, you can see what the 30 cents looks like. 6 cents on the dollar for sheriff's office, road patrol, jail management, etc. 6 cents on the dollar, 3 cents on the dollar for mental health and mental health services, 2 cents on the dollar for 911. 911 and emergency 911 dispatch is the first of this county's sort of centralization, consolidation of service. It used to be everybody had their own dispatch. Every police department, every fire department. In Tivoli in the 60s, way up into the 1970s, it was Betty Simmons. She'd get a phone call. They'd say there's a fire. She'd run down to the firehouse. She'd write it on the board. She'd ring the bell, and the firemen go out. That was dispatch up until, well, I'd say the late 60s. Well, maybe that's a stretch, but the 1960s sounds about right. So the county in the 1990s centralized through 911 service dispatch countywide. That's sharing services, centralizing the cost, and we do it for 2 cents on the dollar. Somebody said to me last year, well, you should just close the parks. That'll save us a lot of money. Well, it'll save us, it saves us 1 penny on the dollar. And for most people, they wonder, what do I get for any of my taxes? And some of them actually think that getting parks is high on their list of services to receive. Bowdoin, the rail trails, and Wilcox, Quiet Cove, I can go down the list. But nevertheless, you get the idea. But for a penny on the dollar, the county maintains an expansive park service for Dutchess County residents that generates economic value as well. But you can see that for 30 cents on that dollar, we're providing those critical and core services that county residents expect from us. And then you begin to wonder, well, why do we have to shoulder the rest of it? So imagine for a second if New York State were just to take back 5 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on it. Maybe they'd take all 70 cents on the dollar. We would only need 30 cents on the dollar we collect to manage and maintain county government, to provide core services for the residents who live here. But instead, what Albany does is they come up with their programs, they come up with their expenditures, and then they make you pay for it through us. Now, why is it important to continue to harp on this issue? Well, think for a second. If you're not responsible for paying your bill, do you care how much waste exists? I mean, if John and I are out to dinner and we're having a modest little meal, I mean, John, I don't even know, he probably eats like tuna fish, that's it, right? Something nicer? If I'm paying, yeah, sure. So John and I maybe have a meal, and Marge and Rob and all these other folks, they're out there, they're eating it up, right? Lobster and steak and what have you. I mean, they are having a meal. And midway through the conversation, John and I look up and they're gone. I don't know where they went, but they had food. I mean, it was on the floor, it was up on the tables. They were eating a massive amount. And then John and I get our bill for our tuna fish sandwich, and we look at the bill and we realize, holy cow, we're paying for their food. We're paying for their expense. We're paying for all of their, I mean, they're drinkers. They had a lot. So think about it for a minute. If you're not paying the bill, right, do you care what you order off the menu? Somebody else is responsible for picking up the tab. Do you really care about wasting food, wasting the resource, abuse? No, you don't. So our position is not just, this isn't just a question of taking money out of the taxpayer's left or right pocket. It's if you believe in your program, you should pay for it. My granddad used to have a saying that you all know, and I'm sure you've probably either received it or give it, and that is, don't tell me what your priorities are. Show me where you spend your money. Don't tell me what your priorities are. Show me where you spend your money. If these are priorities to you, New York State, pay for them. But the truth is they can't pay for them, and they don't want to rein them in, and they don't have to, because they mask their waste, their abuse, their fraud in our taxes. And then you come to us, and rightfully so, and say, well, why do you have to take anything from us? And the truth of the matter is that the state of New York needs to take responsibility for its 70 cents. Any penny on that 70 cents, it ought to take responsibility for. So we continue to hand out your dollar. It's your dollar. On the back of it, contact information. Those phone numbers are all correct for the next 3.5 weeks. These are the phone numbers for state legislators. Now, just so you know, we're honest too. Our number's on there too. Mine's at the bottom of the list. You see it right there. We want residents to continue to reach out and make sure state legislators understand we can't continue to shoulder this. Now, do I expect New York to take all 70 cents? Probably I don't. But if we keep the pressure on, at least when they're making spending decisions, they'll consider the impact on us. And if we work together to hold them accountable, the deal I will make to you is that we hold us to the same level of accountability. We don't need 31 cents to provide county services. We don't need 32 cents to provide county services. We need those 30 cents. And if we didn't have the burden of the other 70 cents, we may have more efficiencies we can find in the 30 cents. Because we have staff, we have people who are doing their job, plus administering state and federal programming, and without that we can wring out some more savings too. And each one of these mandated expenditures are crowding out those critical services that we provide. Okay. So we have the 2015 budget reestablishes the county's fiscal condition. For those of you who either received a phone call last week or had a question regarding this particular issue, there was a question regarding the 2015's budget and whether it was stable, whether it was balanced, whether it is not only sound, it is not only stable, it is balanced. And Standard & Poor's, in their evaluation of the county's bond rating, considered the 2015 budget before they gave us our bond rating upgrade. What does that mean? Well, when I came into office, because the budget that I inherited did appropriate all of the county's savings account as a one-time revenue stream, we saw a bond rating downgrade, and that, by the way, was part of that $40 million budget gap that I talked about. So we have been carefully reestablishing the county's fund balance in order to provide security, stability, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But Standard & Poor's, in their review of our 2015 budget and our practices, listed and gave us first a bond rating upgrade, AA+, which puts us in the highest and most well-managed counties that they rate. And only one county in New York State is higher than us, with a higher bond rating than us. And that one, by the way, is Westchester County. Now, why? Interesting, very interesting. In New York State, county governments are required to make town governments whole. When somebody doesn't pay the East Fishkill property tax bill, East Fishkill doesn't lose the money. Dutchess County, by law, gives East Fishkill the money, the difference. We make up the difference, which is why fund balance is important, because in certain communities, we put out a lot of money for unpaid taxes. And then we go through the process of trying to get those dollars back. In Westchester County, the towns make the county whole. So if you don't pay your county bill, John Hickman in East Fishkill makes the county whole. So that's the only reason they have a higher bond rating, because every dollar they claim to receive, they will receive. And by the way, us making the towns whole provides them a higher bond rating because of it. So whenever there's a question about the relationship the county and the municipalities have, don't ever forget that we do share sales tax revenue and we make them whole. So when they don't get a property tax bill, we cut the check. County taxpayers from Red Hook, Amenia, whatever, we're all covering the costs of unpaid town taxes. But we received the bond rating upgrade, second highest bond rating among the best managed in the state. Why is this important? Well, the higher bond rating reduces the cost of borrowing. It's like your credit report. The higher the rating, the better off you are. Lower interest rates, and additionally, it reflects fiscal stability. Why is that important? Major employers, like one who's in the process of transitioning here, look at these things. Major employers do not move, do not grow, and do not occupy communities that are in fiscal distress. Ask Detroit. Right? Major employers do not move into communities that do not have their house in order. And what Standard & Poor's has said is we have reestablished the county's fiscal stability, and that is the right message at the right time. And believe me, I know. I've seen the trades magazines across the country. They've talked about not only the Global Foundries deal here in East Fishkill, but they talked about the gap numbers, the gap investment in Fishkill. And this is a positive statement, especially when you could look to towns and communities inside Dutchess County and counties from around the state who are in fiscal distress, that they don't have the ability to pay their bills. This is an important reestablishment for us, and it was a priority for us when we began this transformation. Okay, so this is pretty much where I end on the generic stuff, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. That's not too bad. It's about my schedule. So just to repeat again, the 2015 budget adopted last Thursday in a bipartisan vote. Not everybody voted for it, but we did have a bipartisan vote. Smallest workforce in 32 years. You saw the bond rating, and I've made comments on that regarding the county's fiscal stability. This budget does cut county optional spending. This budget does provide the largest property tax levy cut in 14 years, and because of that, we as taxpayers, will receive a rebate check funded by the state of New York. Let me just end my comments by thanking you for taking some time out around the holidays. I know that coming to a town hall meeting is not the highest thing on your list of things to do. However, we do want an opportunity to keep the dialogue dialogue open. We want to be able to respond to questions, and you might have some specific ones. I'll answer whatever you got as best I can. But most importantly, though, I think that the decisions that we've been making over the course of the last 3 years are beginning to reflect themselves in this budget. We are starting to see the benefits of some very difficult choices that have been made over the course of the last several years. And for that, all I would say to you is thank you. I've asked for your patience, I've asked for your help, and I've asked for your support. I think as a county, we are in a much better condition today than we were 3 years ago, and I think we're on the upside. I do. I believe that the county is definitely moving in the right direction, and we have a long way still to go, but we've seen great progress in these last few years. So with that, if you have some questions, I think I'm probably going to have to ask you to use this microphone. If you'd like to be heard by anyone other than me, you have to speak into this microphone so that they can get you on television. So with that, any questions? Oh, thank you. You can clap. I don't know. For the record, for those folks at home, I didn't ask you to clap. Somebody was starting to clap, and I didn't want to discourage him. So, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bob Wilbarg. I have a question.
Sure.
First, let me compliment you on the budget. I think it's great. But something I don't understand. This was a story in the Poughkeepsie Journal from December 6th, and it says the tax rate will go up ever so slightly.
Yes.
Now, the only way that can happen is that the tax base goes down, considering you've cut everything.
Yes.
Is that why? Because I don't understand.
You got it. That's a great question. The tax rate, first of all, I want to be clear. There is no such thing as a Dutchess County tax rate. Each town has an individual tax rate based on the total county tax levy divided by your town's assessed valuation. I have a tendency to give far more information than is necessary, but I think in this case it is somewhat necessary. So the average, the blended tax rate that was reported and that we have to communicate to you does go up 2 cents, but that is not universal. Every town will be different based on the levy versus your assessment times the state's equalization rate. Follow me? Yeah, it's clear as day, right? So you get that. So each town, though, will have a different rate. The reason the averaged rate increases 2 cents is because, as you said, absolutely the loss of assessment. We have cut what we can out of the expenditures. We have reduced the levy to the extent we can afford to do that, and that didn't overcome what will be a 2 cent increase on the averaged rate. Now, every individual taxpayer will see that reflected differently. So someone the other day said, well, does that mean my tax bill is going down? And I said, it might. In certain instances, the bill will go down. In some instances, your bill might go up slightly based on your assessed valuation in your town at the time you get the bill. But the good news is what is in the control of Dutchess County government is the levy. That's how much we tax Dutchess County residents, and we are taxing Dutchess County residents less this year, less in 2015 than we will this year. Now, the upside is, I mentioned early on, the loss of assessed valuation. The shrinkage is shrinking. We've gone from about a $1.3 billion annual loss in assessed valuation to a $300 million loss in assessed valuation. Now, those are big numbers, but the spread is positive. $1.3 billion to $300 million. We are ever so slightly moving in the right direction, and we think, and based on the economic growth that we have seen over these last couple of years, we are starting to sort of peak upward again. So as assessed valuation grows, if we don't tax more, the rate will drop, and then yes, your bill will go down again. And then I do want to say, though, the way the state law was written on these rebate checks, if a municipality stays below the property tax cap, so we could all go up 2% and you still get a check. This county decided that we were not going to do what some have, which is go up to the cap, you get your rebate check, and then you should feel good about that because you got your. Our position was, let's do everything we can to reduce where we can, and the outcome will be in this case a levy reduction plus the rebate check, which again I could come up with 1,000 easier ways for you to have your own money in your pockets, but that's the way the state law was written. Does that answer the question good enough? Yes. I have this problem. My answers are always longer than the questions. So I was at a town hall meeting in Poughkeepsie, and this fellow went on for almost 3.5 minutes, and I said, listen, fella, I mean, you could keep talking, but I'm likely to go longer than you are. Other questions? Well, let me do this, because I always do this for county legislators, because I get to see all of you all the time. Why don't we see, we'll have residents, non-elected officials ask first, and then I'll circle back around.
May I ask a question that's not based on the budget?
Let's see if anyone else has questions. How's about that? Anyone else? Sir? Yep, hold on. I know you.
I just have a question on the 911 system. I know you guys have looked at every area of county budget, and we appreciate what you've done to keep the taxes down. But just looking at the comparison, the Sheriff's Department provides so much service to the entire county, and 911 is like a third of that. Just can you talk to me about 911 and why the costs of that are a third of the Sheriff's Office, just by comparison?
Sure, fair enough. Well, first and foremost, the Sheriff's Office, do you want to pull up the dollar? The Sheriff's Office includes the non-mandated portion of the jail, right? Yeah. So number one, the Sheriff's Office includes not only the Sheriff's Department road patrols, 95, 96 deputies. What are we up to now? 98 deputies. It also includes the Civil Division, which is mandated. We are required to have the Sheriff's Office maintain the Civil Division, and it includes the jail. And the jail is really one of, and if somebody really wants to ask, I'll talk about the jail, but I don't usually, I could be here for a week about that one. But nevertheless, the jail is a huge cost center. It is one of the few areas that, despite the mandate, we have some control over, so we're trying to shrink that expenditure. So that's in there as well. Now, 911 is only slightly misleading in that it's not just the dispatch. So E911, 2 cents on the dollar, includes the 911 dispatch. It includes the Dutchess County Fire Training Center. It includes emergency management in its entirety, including the county's Medical Reserve Corps and our work with not only fire but EMS. So it's a broader responsibility than just, I shouldn't say just, it's broader responsibility than 911 dispatch alone. So that's the breadth of what we provide in 911 service. Okay? Other questions?
I just say the 911 that would be included, like the schools, lockdown services.
What?
State police officers at school doing the lockdown. That be
No, this is only the county's role in 911 service, which is dispatch, fire training, EMS training, and then management on emergency situations. For instance, last 2 weeks ago on Thanksgiving, Marge knows this, and John knows this as well. John took a number of calls to the extent, and I was on. Our 911 system was open all day long. Our staff was in all day long, and admittedly, I spent much of the day on the phones with them. That's the county's responsibility to manage, and we do that through a consolidated agreement with municipalities. We also manage the it's not shared services. When you call out another fire company, that's mutual aid. Thank you. I was a 15-year member of the Tivoli Fire Company. I lost that one. Mutual aid system. So we are responsible for making sure that flows in cases of emergency. So that's what we do. And we do, by the way, provide some assistance to schools through the School Resource Officer Program, and also we provide training assistance through the Sheriff's Office when it comes to security and school resource officers at the local school level. Other questions? Okay.
I did my homework on this budget, and I spoke with as many of the no votes on the legislature as I could. I called them all. A few of them returned my calls, and I'll get to that in a second. I do actually have a question relative to something you brought up before regarding waste, fraud, and abuse within the social service programs. A number of months ago, I think it was 9 months ago, maybe 8 or 9 months ago, I brought to you and your staff a model from 2 different counties within New York State. I believe it was Washington County and Sullivan County, that have both dramatically cut back waste, fraud, and abuse within the social service programs. And I have yet to see any of that model be implemented, which would be evidenced by a huge uptick in arrests and accountability for that waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm wondering what the, not the excuse for that is, but what's the reason that we haven't seen that?
It's the 2 counties that Dan's referring to make use of their deputy sheriffs or sheriff's office to do a fraud investigation. And there was an analysis done with them. In fact, the counties that do it, we contacted them. The county sheriff Dutchess County Sheriff's Office and Dutchess County's Community and Family Services Department did discuss, I want to say with Washington, I don't think it was Sullivan County that we talked to, and when we concluded it, the only difference between, there's two differences between what we do and what they do. Number one, they use law enforcement, as I said, to assist in the enforcement of fraud, which, by the way, precludes them from offsetting the cost by the state. So in other words, in order to use the deputies, you lose the state's reimbursement for fraud, waste, and abuse investigations. So that would mean new costs for the county, number one. In the short term, we would have to add the cost until we saw the savings on the other side. So number one, you don't get the reimbursement rates, and number two, you don't get the press. And I don't mean that in a sort of a disparaging way. The benefit of what they do is that because they're making the arrest, they get the public benefit. You and I see that happen, and that does discourage others from engaging in it. But when we did the analysis, they're not securing more dollars than we are in fraud and abuse. Percentage-wise, we get about the same in, and we used to have a slide, and I'm sorry we don't, but we did have a slide on what we were attaining. The downside is we don't tell you enough about it, and I'm hopeful we can come up with a way to explain that more, because I do think that it's important for people to know, one, that we're doing it, we go after waste, fraud, and abuse in the social service system, and two, not just the public understand, but anyone who wishes to defraud the county or the state, they need to know that's happened. Now, the only other thing I want you to know is that when Dutchess County or Sullivan County or Washington County identify $1 in waste, fraud, or abuse, the state keeps the dollar. Okay? So right now, we spend $43.5 million in Medicaid cost. That's what the state requires of us to pay. If they didn't have any cap, in other words, we had to pay the whole thing, it'd be about $80 million. So in order to benefit from $1 of waste, fraud, and abuse, we've got to get below $43.5 million. So it's not to say we don't care about it, it's to say what happens in those scenarios is that we spend the resource to get the fraud, to identify the abuse, to get the dollar back, and then the state keeps it. And you then weigh the risk versus the reward. And that's one of the reasons that the Sheriff's Office right now didn't necessarily want to be in the position of taking on the responsibility, because frankly we'd end up adding deputies, and at least in the short term we'd have to identify how much we would save. And we won't save anything because we're not offsetting the cost, because we're not saving it. The state keeps the savings. Does that make sense? Did I answer? I mean, let me put that differently. Did what I say make sense? But what I said, you understood, but the system doesn't make any sense.
The system makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
There has to be a deterrent effect. There has to be a deterrent effect, which you alluded to a few minutes ago. And by the way, everybody sitting in this room presumably is a New York State taxpayer as well. So I guess we have a fundamental disagreement, or I have it with somebody in county government, as to how this should be approached. But let me move on. I'd like to get back to the budget thing. So I had some concerns that there were that many dissenting votes on this budget. So I made phone calls, and a couple of things that I discovered were, number one, only 4 legislators called me back. All of them were very nice and helpful, and all of them said pretty much the same thing. And they seem to be issues regarding procedure, in that my understanding is some of the bond measures that were passed within the county budget didn't necessarily have a dollar figure attached to it. It's to be determined. For instance, the jail expansion that's happening. But my understanding is that the legislators will be expected to vote on those expenditures before they're made. So there's a check in place for that, and they all acknowledge that. And essentially what it came down to was, number one, one legislator felt like the $300,000 that's being saved shouldn't necessarily be returned to the taxpayers, and that legislator and I had a pretty direct conversation about that. Her feeling was that that money could be spent on something else within county government, which I have a fundamental disagreement with. But the other part of it was message sending, which I find problematic, because the budget is complex enough for most people to understand, where the average taxpayer, myself included, doesn't have time to dig through message sending. All 4 of the legislators I spoke to said that this was a fiscally sound budget. So I was tough on you on the energy tax, and my purpose for coming out here today was to congratulate you on a job well done with this budget.
And I just, listen, I kind of sensed where he was headed, so I didn't want to stop him. I will say this, and Marge and Rob and Donna are here. We don't dismiss people who have difference of opinion. In the county legislature, I came into office saying that we were going to work together, whether we liked it or not. And in fact, all of us as elected officials are to work with other people who are elected, work with other people who are elected. That's our responsibility. So when, at the last minute, we did receive notice from 6 of the county legislators, I shouldn't say that. I think all of the Democratic minority said they were planning, they had some problems with the budget, they were going to vote no. The only thing I will tell you is that we spent much of the summer, and this was at the legislature's direction, actually in response to the public's concern that we wring out everything we could. We spent most months of the summer doing a pre-budget analysis with the legislature, each department coming in, presenting to them, answering detailed questions. And then when we presented the budget, and I will say that I don't know that this has happened before me coming into office, but I offered to meet with both caucuses, Republican majority and the Democratic minority, individually to say what are the issues that are concerning you, what are the points that you want to address, and before we finalize this budget, are there things you need us to know? Let's just say those same legislators declined that meeting. So we began to craft the budget in concert with the legislature, and when they did their budget review, the several weeks of budget review, they came up with about 112 or 113 questions, down to page 57, line 72, what is this, right? Why? In fact, I think one question was why there was a $400 reduction in this line item. None of the issues that they released 2 weeks ago were in those questions. And then the night of legislative adoption, none of those issues were brought up. And that's disheartening to me, because our position is if you've got a good idea, we'll consider it. And we have. Minority members have brought to the table amendments to resolutions that we encourage the majority to adopt because they make sense. If it makes sense, we're happy to do it. And if it doesn't, at least give us the ability to respond to them and have it an engaged dialogue. I will just say to you, in that particular instance that you've referenced, it didn't happen. And that's upsetting, because our goal has been to try to get everyone working together. I guess it is certainly easy to pass blame, and Dan referenced it. Last year I was out in the community saying this is why we did what we did, and I'm sorry for it, and we corrected it. I just think everybody should be held to the same standard. And playing these games where at the last minute you say, hey, let's throw this hand grenade in and see what happens. Now let me just reference one last thing: the capital spending. There was a question. And a complaint that in the Dutchess County Capital Plan, we are required to create a 5-year capital plan so that we don't do just annualized budget. We project into the future the major projects we hope to accomplish over the next 5 years, and we conduct an analysis and then put a price tag associated with them. It's like, if you're going to build a house, you're going to identify what property you're looking for, what's the cost of that property, you're going to do the development, you're going to get an architect to do the design, you're going to identify the cost of that, and then when you're done, you're going to go to your wife and say, it's going to cost us $250,000, right? And then hopefully she says yes. The same is true with the capital plan. We develop that, we put together the numbers, and we present it to the legislature in this capital plan. There are times where there are capital projects that we expect to accomplish within the next 5 years that we haven't conducted the analysis yet for. We could either pretend like they don't exist, like we're not going to solve the jail problem. We are. And we put them in the plan with a price to be determined. We then go back to the legislature when the analysis is done and say, this is the price, and then we consider moving forward. That has happened every county that has a capital plan does this. That is a shallow and hollow argument because, first of all, we're in the process of conducting extensive analysis on what to do with the jail situation. And then secondly, as you've said, the budget doesn't borrow money. The budget pays for the borrowed money. It's like, you're at home, your budget pays for your credit card payment. It pays for your mortgage payment. So the budget doesn't create debt. The budget pays for the debt that was already approved by the legislature. So for any project that we have to consider moving forward, we've got to go back to the legislature, show them the project, show them the cost, and not only do we need a simple majority, we need 2/3 of the county legislature to approve that. And if they do that, which they did in the last 2 years, in most cases unanimously, the budget that comes out following the borrowing of that money includes the payment for the debt. So I would just say to you, it is more messaging than anything else. And it's unfortunate because this is a solid financial plan. I didn't just say that. Standard & Poor's said it. The Poughkeepsie Journal said it. The independent auditors, the legislature hires said it. It is a sound fiscal plan. It's probably the most sound we've been able to present in maybe the last 8 years. Those who have not asked questions, let's do that first.
It's taken me a while to figure out how to ask a question instead of making a speech. It bothers me that the health and mental hygiene budget is only 3% and the Sheriff's Department is 6%, because to me, it just relates that you're spending the money on the rear end instead of the front end. And we know that we have, as you have begun, many symposiums on addiction, etc. So here, I finally got to the question. So what does other optional services include, and does it include any study on the effect of increasing mental health services on, in the scheme of things about the drug problems here?
Let's bring up the dollar one more time, because I do want to clarify. This dollar shows you the net to county cost. Mental hygiene, so that 3 cents on the dollar is the net county cost. Mental hygiene is one of our largest cost centers. In fact, it's more than the sheriff's office minus the jail. So we do spend a significantly larger amount of money in mental health services. Now, that said, what I will tell you is that mental hygiene, mental health is a major cost center for the county. That's 6 cents on the sheriff's office. That's what we spend on the sheriff's office. There's no hidden additional costs. There's no other mandated expense for the sheriff's office. That 3 cents on mental hygiene is just what we pay for, netted out for Dutchess County. So a lot of what we do in mental health services is part of that big pantheon of mandated and mandated related services. So it is a little misleading. We spend a heck of a lot more. Now, Dutchess County spends more on mental health services, including chemical addiction, drug abuse, drug addiction, etc., than Westchester County, Erie County, and Nassau or Suffolk. It's one of the large. So we have a huge mental health infrastructure, but I would say it's not the best mental health infrastructure. So let me tell you what we are doing in the area of mental health services. If you want to pull that slide back up. So the entire mental health system in Dutchess County was created and centered around state-owned mental health facilities. The Hudson River Psych, Harlem Valley Psych, and then the developmentally disabled centers in Dutchess County. We became the place in certainly the southern end of New York State where those with severe mental illness were brought from lots of places. In fact, for those of you who don't know, I mean, maybe most of you do, but the Harlem Valley is called the Harlem Valley. Why? It's not because it has anything to do with the Eastern Dutchess. The Harlem Valley is called the Harlem Valley because there was a train line, there still is, from Harlem into Dutchess County that brought those with mental health issues up from New York City to a facility in Dutchess County. Thus, Harlem and Harlem Valley, created by this direct connection back and forth. So our entire mental health infrastructure built around state-owned facilities. And then the state closed the facilities. In fact, the state abandoned much of what it did. And what Dutchess County's response to that was, in part because it's where the money was at the time, was to then build a clinical infrastructure locally, meaning we owned and managed psych clinics, facilities, centers all across Dutchess County to take the burden that New York dropped on us and institutionalize it into our expense. Well, then what happened was the deinstitutionalization of mental health. So people went from facilities into individual residences and homes and support services, but Dutchess County's mental health system stayed pretty much the same. So we were spending a huge amount of money in institutionalization and clinical care, which I think, as you just sort of suggested, you didn't mean it specifically in mental health, isn't the most effective. We're spending it at the rear end in mental health services, right? So what we've been trying to do over the last 3 years is get to the preventative intervention and diversion end, because it's less costly for the taxpayer and less hurtful to the individual. It is more humane, it is more effective to be in the area of intervention, prevention, and diversion as opposed to institutionalization. So what we've been attempting to do is shift to intervention, prevention, diversion. We've started to do that. We've saved some taxpayer dollars. The state of New York, we went back to Albany and said, you've got to offset the burden that you created in Dutchess County, and we are moving that way. And what we are in the process of doing right now is merging, in fact, public health, community health with mental health. So behavioral and physical health merged into one department with the goal of trying to invest more effectively in intervention, diversion, and prevention. And we think that that's a better model. It's not going to change that 2 cents, or that 6 cents. What is it? That 3 cents, excuse me. It's not. We hope the 3 cents becomes 2 cents, quite frankly. But it's not because we want to spend less. It's because we want to spend more effectively. And we're not getting out of those 3 cents what we put into it. I promise you that. We have to get to a more effective system and integrate it really with the delivery of other services. In particular, again, prevention, intervention, diversion, because if we don't, they end up in our jail. The individuals end up in a more costly service center. But that dollar, long answer, short question, that dollar is slightly misleading because it's those little cents on our side, and our 30 cents are the netted county cost. It hides, it puts into the other 70 cents the expenses related to mandates. Does that help?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
what's included in the
Other services, it's financial management, it's debt service, it's all the other things that that are not service centered. So budget management, Department of Finance, debt service payments, all of those back office supports that are not, you don't see readily identified as a service area. What else did I miss in there? Health insurance?
health insurance is what
Okay, by the department. So it's pretty much debt service and sort of the administration, my office administration of that, and legislature. Okay? Yes, sir. Shout.
Have you seen any positive impacts from the upgrade of our bond rating so far?
So the bond rating increase, as I said, sent the right message at the right time. And I'll tell you, we were in regular conversations with both IBM and the representatives at Global Foundries, and in serious conversations with Gap. And I will tell you that all ask the question, where are you? Financially, where is the county? And there were a couple questions that were interesting. One, there was a dialogue about the community college and whether or not this county was committed to investment in the community college, because, by the way, that's where major employers want a solid public education, community college, and then advanced learning campuses in and around the region to keep the workforce trained and prepared to work. So they were questioning us on that, and they were questioning us about the county's fiscal condition in both cases, to be able to say to them, we're on the right track, and look at what Standard & Poor's is saying, definitely helped. I'm not going to say, that closes any deal, but a stable environment, economic environment for the county means good news for employers. The other is we just went into the market to borrow for this year's infrastructure, and I think we saw a slight downtick in interest rates. So we did, in fact, secure a borrowing rate that was slightly less than expected, which provides savings for taxpayers. Now, as Dan mentioned, and some of those legislators mentioned, we do have big capital projects outstanding that we want to consider. The lower the interest rate, the less money Dutchess County taxpayers have to pay when we borrow in order to accomplish. And you can't build, you can't buy major highway equipment, buy a road repair and bridge replacement, or fix a jail problem without borrowing. You're not doing that out of operational expense. So the lower we can keep those interest rates, the better off we are. And we did, in fact, see an immediate benefit from that bond rating increase. Other questions?
One of the optional expenses, transportation, and I was wondering what your offices are doing to kind of revamp, look at, remanage the loop system?
Yeah.
That's a good question. We're actually going to have to begin a real conversation with the county legislature about public transit. First, it's not mandated, certainly, but the way the federal and state government funds public transportation, it's not ever going to function without local taxpayer subsidy if you want it. In other words, the state requires the county to pay for about a third. 10%. The state and federal government require us to put up 10% of the total cost. If we don't get the state aid and the federal aid in order to manage the transportation system. Now you can say, well, we don't want it. Well, if we don't want the state aid, then we don't have and federal aid, then we don't have a bus system at all. And I would suggest you in a county this large, in particular, there are certain populations that, frankly, this is what they get from their taxes. I don't mean to personalize it, but I have a child who may never drive a vehicle. I hope she does, but she has a developmental disability that will probably preclude her from getting a driver's license. But I know that she's got the capacity to work. I know that she's got the desire to do things as she grows up. I know that she loves learning. She's a little young, so I won't want to say that she's going off to college just yet, but I expect that she will, darn it. And the public transportation system in this county may be the only way that she can find her way around the county, as others do, seniors and others they're paying their taxes, they're trying to go to work, and this is the service they get. That said, we want to have a more engaged conversation with the legislature about what is the best way to provide public transportation in a county our size. There was a letter to the editor, I think, questioning Dutchess County's transit system versus the Albany Capital District Transit Authority. My family's originally from Yonkers. Some of you may have even moved here from New York City. You cannot compare an urban transportation system with a rural transportation system. Our county is geographically size much larger than most urban centers. So moving people from Fishkill to Poughkeepsie to Red Hook, Red Hook to Millerton, Millerton to Pauling is not the same as driving across Manhattan. Just isn't. And being able to maintain a rapid response transit system is nearly impossible countywide. So we always evaluate routes, and we try to do the best we can. But there are some that need consideration, and there are certain areas where targeted growth in public transit could move people back and forth from work, which could generate economic benefit for the county. We're going to have to engage in that conversation with the legislature. But we do have a very good system in that we are constantly looking for efficiencies. We're trying constantly to generate new revenue. I'll tell you, last year, I use this as an example. It's probably not the best one, but apparently you could take a bus to Dutchess Stadium and watch a ball game. You just couldn't take one to leave the ball game. So we suggested that one of the things that we may want to do is allow people to take a bus home from the stadium. Why? Well, number one, there are a lot of people who do get off a train and would like to go to a ball game. In particular, we know a number of people who come up from New York City, and it's $8 to go to Dutchess Stadium as opposed to going to Yankee Stadium for however much, or you can get into Citi Field for, I think, free these days. They pay you to show up, but I'm a Mets fan. I can say I'm a Mets fan. I can say. But there are people who would do that. And well, you know what we found? When we did the route, I think it was a couple $1,000s in new expense, but we started to get the revenue, which offsets it. And at the same time, we're growing the route for the first time ever in Beacon, which is generating new revenue for the county to offset the expense. So we're looking at little targeted ways to generate new benefit from transit to start to offset the cost. But you will never be in a situation, if you have busing in this county or any community in the country, you will never be in a position where fares and state and federal aid cover the cost to taxpayers. It is required that you have a 10% subsidy, and our goal is to keep as low and as close to that 10% as is possible. But it is a service that good, decent, hardworking taxpayers rely on. We just want to minimize the cost to Dutchess County's taxpayers as best we can. Somebody had their hand up. Other questions? I've got a fellow in the back of the room here. We'll do a couple more.
Mark, I just wanted to say thank you for your years as executive and the work you've done to get this budget in line and get us a budget that we can actually live with. It's really gratifying to see this and to have some help with the legislature to get it done. The other thing is, you mentioned, the gentleman over here mentioned about the 911 center and how important that 911 center is to everybody's life in this town and all through Dutchess County and the state. The 911 center gets a message and sends it out to us in this pager. And then a volunteer like myself will pick this up and then respond to that call. It could be your life, it could be an auto accident, it could be your house fire. Around the holidays, it's very difficult, especially with all the above. And the 911 center is the heartbeat of East Fishkill for messaging and for Dutchess County. And it's good that we put the money forward to make it a very active and very professional workforce. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I won't add to that. That's a good endorsement of their work. Rob, you had a question?
Thank you, Mark. Could you share with the folks a little bit of the infrastructure development planning going on at the airport?
Let me also, by the way, and I forgot to mention this, we actually have moved the administration of public transit from the planning department, which doesn't make entire sense, to the Public Works Department, which actually saves us a little bit. One of the things we did several years ago, and I'll talk about the airport, but one of the things we did several years ago was in our consolidation, we took the auto center, and Marge is going to laugh about this because she and I have had these conversations. The Dutchess County maintained an independent auto center. It was a department with a department head, and it was run by the Office of Central Services. The auto center, which is where we maintain all of the county's fleet except all of the other county fleet. In other words, the generalized vehicles, cars, leases, those kind of things, but the heavy equipment was maintained by the Public Works Department. Well, the auto center has had a series of mechanics. And so did the Public Works Department have mechanics. And we thought, why do we need two separate independent entities doing basically the same work? In fact, they work much better collaboratively. So we moved the auto center under the Public Works Department. It did result in the elimination of several positions, but it created a greater amount of efficiency, not to mention the ability to manage countywide the inventory. One county entity, Department of Public Works, knows the replacement parts, the tires, the vehicle fleet, the damage history, the purchasing history on every vehicle. Makes a lot of sense to do it under one house, one roof, one entity, one administration. Saves a lot of money. Same for transit. We're moving under Public Works because they're the people managing, in essence, those same types of vehicles, and that will save us resources. So the Dutchess County Airport has been a topic of conversation for a number of years. I will say to you it's for probably all of the right reasons, meaning that the public can only shoulder so much burden. It has been allowed to lay in a stagnant phase. How's that? There has not been much investment since IBM and some of the private carriers pulled out. And because of limited resource, there has not been much investment since. Now, the problem with that is that, like public transit, the county taxpayer shoulders a subsidy. Whatever the airport doesn't generate in revenue to cover its expense, you and I as taxpayers pay for. When I came into office, that was about $750,000 a year. Over the last 3 years, we have cut that subsidy 44%, which I hope is somewhere in the neighborhood of $430,000. Is that about right? So we pay now this year about $430,000, headed in the right direction. The problem is that the airport does not have the right resource to make money. Now, what does that mean? We don't have infrastructure. In fact, it was funny. One of the legislators who voted no on the budget said, well, I don't understand. What do they do for water now? We don't have water at the airport. There is no municipal water system. Well, I don't understand. How do they do? There is no water at the county airport. So you can't get private business to open, sustain, or grow a business at an airport without municipal water and/or sewer. In particular, our largest tenant is AAG. They are a major helicopter company. They have 65 employees, $6 million in payroll. In order to keep and/or expand them on site at the airport, we need municipal water. Over the course of the last 3 years, we have probably had to turn away no less than a half dozen prospective employers at the airport. The airport is a great campus for development. It has the right resource. Of course, it's a transportation hub, so if you're a big business or a big employer, it's a pretty decent place to be, centrally located. Because of the lack of water, we have had to turn away business and business development on site. That is a problem. So we believe that through investment of water, expanding from the county's water pipeline into the airport, that we can attract businesses. Businesses move here to the airport. We not only generate immediate revenue for the county, but we can also eliminate the subsidy and grow the private sector employment. So we do have a plan to move water onto the airport property. It's we're seeking subsidy and support from the federal and state government through a number of their infrastructure programs, and our hope will be in 2015 to bring water to the airport. We think and we know that that will attract new business and new business development. At the same time, we're trying to use the airport as a venue that would attract both airplane enthusiasts and tourists as well. If you didn't get to experience it, and I hope you can this year. Earlier this year, we hosted the Collins Foundation. This is the Wings of Freedom tour. These are World War II aircraft that travel the country. I'm telling you, John Morris, who runs the Dutchess County Airport, took us off to get them to come to Dutchess County. They picked a random day. We know it was during the week. It was tough for people, but traffic stood still around that airport to watch these massive airplanes, these warplanes come into Dutchess County and then fly. In fact, one of them you can see on the right side of that slide. And we had thousands of visitors. Now, what we also did was we sold 1,000 gallons of fuel. I don't know if you follow airplane fuel, but that's a lot of gallons, and it's a lot of money. So they had such a great experience in Dutchess County. They want to come back next year, and we believe that they'll come on a holiday weekend. This place will be packed. We also now have we've organized a steering committee to bring us back an air show. We had an air show about 20 years ago. It hasn't been there since. One of the reasons it hasn't been there since is because the county shouldered most of the cost. I have a secret plan that has somebody else shouldering most of the cost. In fact, our goal is to have a private manager of the event handle bringing in the air show, handle selling the tickets, and the county will receive some benefit from the ticket sale, mostly through the fuel sales. But my opinion is, if it generates $1 more than it costs us, it's a benefit. If it's a tourist attraction, but we're not putting the money down. I don't know why the county thought they had to pay for an air show, but it seems like an air show is a private investment, private event. Private people can put private money up, and if we can benefit a little bit from it, we will. We also have a scheduled event on site now. The airport is an interesting venue for like concerts and festivals and things of that nature. So we actually have one scheduled. We'll bring in about $10,000 in direct revenue to the county this coming year. So anyway, the goal is to make the airport an economic engine. It represents about $44 million in economic development or economic value now. We think that we can make a much greater impact, and we can do it without a huge investment of tax dollars. So thanks for that. Do one or two more questions, and then I'll let you all go home, or you let me go home.
How much is it?
Which?
To get the water into the air?
Oh, good question. Thank you. The total project cost is about $2.6 million. Total, $2.6 million. The county has secured $750,000 from the state's economic development, such and such. We expect to secure an additional $200,000. So if you're doing the math with me, that's $950,000 total. $200,000 from Central Hudson's economic development program that we actually helped create, Dutchess County, when they did the merger with Fortis. We have applied for federal EDA, Economic Development Agency money, that we think will total somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. So we're now down from 2.6. We're subtract 1.9. We're down to what? $700,000, which we expect the county will have to borrow in order to finish the project, and then as users come online, they'll start to pay the cost of the water. So we expect a $700,000 to $800,000 bond that could go out for about 20 years with the customers on site, business people on site paying the user fee. So
Tenants lined up?
we have a handful that we think we can attract, but it's like anything else. They're not going to say anything unless they know they've got water. I believe that we have some very decent prospects that if we have water on site will not only move in, but we have a couple, and I mentioned one of them, that we think will want to expand on site as well. Yeah. Yeah.
The executive orders on immigration, what's going to be the hit on our mandate?
You know, it's a good question we don't have an answer to. Right now, there are two federal actions that that right now don't impact Dutchess County's Medicaid costs, but it's an interesting question because there's only 2 states in America that require local governments to shoulder Medicaid, us and South Carolina. South Carolina has a program that's, you know, like this much, to New York State's this much. The two issues that we're worried, I shouldn't say worried about, we're concerned about at the moment. The executive order on immigration, we don't know yet. The federal government has not provided us or the state what they expect the Medicaid costs to be affiliated with the president's executive order. So I don't have an answer on that, although all of the state and local associations that are involved in Medicaid are asking the question. The second is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, which the president calls Obamacare, so I guess it's okay to call it Obamacare now. Right now, the federal government is offsetting the state's Medicaid cost in New York, thus the county's Medicaid cost for all those who are accessing Medicaid as part of accessing health insurance. Those two programs, those two issues, are adding to New York State's Medicaid bill. Currently, the federal government's paying that, right? And secondly, the state is, at the moment, protecting the counties from the additional cost. I submit to you at some point the cost for, in particular, the Affordable Care Act is going to be so great that the federal government, assuming no change, the federal government can't offset every state's impact, and in this state, New York is not going to offset every county dollar, and that worries us. Right now in New York, when you have an insurance issue, you want access through the exchange, you get asked about whether your income level and whether or not you would qualify for Medicaid. So in New York, the goal within the state system is if you qualify for Medicaid, Albany wants you to go to Medicaid. Well, for now, the federal government's picking up the bill, right? Our concern is the more they push to Medicaid, at some point the dam's going to break and the state and federal government isn't going to offset the cost, and we're going to have to shoulder some burden in the future. Now, I would say to you that this is a conspiracy theory, except every time the state of New York has been responsible for offsetting a mandate, they start by paying all of it or most of it, and they end up paying for none of it or a little bit of it. The best examples I can tell you about are like early intervention special education services. They used to pay 75%, and they said, we'll cover it, you cover 25. Now they pay 25 and we pay 75. So at some point, without any change, we expect the dam to break, and I think that's frightening. Now here's one. See, my answers are too long.
Isn't that the one that's going before the Supreme Court? It's likely to be overturned?
Yep. So the issue will be...
The resolution may be sooner rather than...
Yes, the question, well, assuming the Supreme Court acts sooner rather than later, but yes, you're correct. Most of the ACA is being challenged in one fashion or other in litigation by a number of states. The question of the tax versus penalty has been settled by the Supreme Court, but every other component is still in litigation. So very soon we could know, but we can pretty much bet that at some point that cost is going to be more than the federal government can or the state government can or would shoulder, and that's frightening. And this is the last bit of data I wanted to provide you. Today, as of today, 40% of those who would qualify for Medicaid services as residents of Dutchess County have yet to access Medicaid services. That's before the Affordable Care Act. So that's just to say that there are a number of people out in Dutchess County who, given the need, may turn to, or the desire, may turn to Medicaid as an offset, and that's going to add an additional burden to Dutchess County at some point. Yes?
That was kind of my question. I was thinking with a state plan, we're actually going to pay more. Did we have a state health plan before ACA?
Yes, we had...
Now when it tips over, we'll pay more. We're basically going to pay for like the surrounding states. Wonderful.
Yes, all I would say is the breadth of this could be drastic. I mean, it could be a very huge impact for all of us. So that said, yes, you're paying your federal tax, your state tax, and your county tax to pay for a system in this state that is clearly inefficient. And by the way, even the federal government, now this is how bad it is, the federal government has said to the state of New York, you're abusing our system. Now, for the federal government to say to somebody, you're abusing our system, you've got to be abusing the system. And that's a problem. I mean, that just is. And our argument just is, I mean, to Dan's point about fraud and abuse, every other state has controlled this issue because they pay the bill. They're the ones paying the bill. The other states that have controlled the rate of growth, have controlled fraud, have controlled abuse, and they all have it to some degree. But in New York, the estimate is 40% of Medicaid cost is related to abuse, fraud, or waste. 40%. I mean, that's something that, and if you're not paying for half of it, you don't necessarily care as much. And our argument is that's a problem. One last, anyone else? Okay, it is 7:20. If it's okay with you, I'll say goodnight. What I want to just, again, just thank you. If we didn't cover an area that was on your mind and you want to follow up, you certainly can talk to Rob, Marge, or Donna. But you can also reach out to us. First, I would encourage you to visit duchessny.gov. So those of you at home could visit duchessny.gov. It's a county website. You can visit most of the budget information there. And if you've got questions, please feel free to email or call. And you can email our offices at countyexec@duchessny.gov or call us at 845-486-2000. So with that, I really do hope you have a great holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and God bless. Thanks.